I'm moving furniture.
Okay. Good morning, and you may be seated. So good morning and congratulations. My name is Jamie Gass. I'm director of the Center for School Reform at Pioneer Institute. It's a Boston-based think tank that does research around K-12 education reform. It's a larger room. We don't want the echoes to mute things, so both for judges and for you folks, please kind of speak louder.
Good morning, and congratulations for being here. My name is Jane Warren. I'm an attorney in Massachusetts, and I also teach part-time at Bristol Community College.
Good morning, I'm Tim Murphy. I'm from the University of Chicago, where I work in their continuing ed division, doing a lot of civic engagement stuff, and teach a little history on the side as well.
I'm Taylor Smith.
I'm Harsh Lakamsani.
I'm Aaron Gonzalez.
And your teacher is?
Mrs. Willits.
Brianna.
Well,
Great.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, and thank you for your work. So this is Unit 1. We'll be addressing Question 1, and I'll read all of Unit 1 and all of Question 1. Unit 1, what are the philosophical and historical foundations of the American political system? Why did the founders prefer a Republican form of government to a democracy? Does such sentiment exist today? Explain your response. What evidence, if any, is there that suggests that the United States has evolved from being a republic to being a democratic republic? What civic dispositions among the people are required for the healthy functioning of a democratic republic? Should government encourage civic dispositions that promote a healthy, functioning democratic republic? If not, why? If so, how? Timer, you may begin.
In Hernandez v. Texas, Latinos were affirmed 14th Amendment protections in the unanimous ruling of the Supreme Court.
In Tinker v. Des Moines, 4 adolescent plaintiffs were affirmed First Amendment rights in schools in the 72 ruling of the Supreme Court.
In Lesser v. Garnett, the constitutionality of the 19th Amendment was affirmed in a unanimous ruling of the Supreme Court.
Cases like these marked the transition of a pure republic into a more democratic republic. The framers created a republic due to a pressing fear of majority tyranny and their belief in the importance of the minority voice. The founders did not believe a democracy could function in our nation. They used the trustee theory of representation. We elect our representatives directly and trust them with our constituency. Cato V feared that the executive would become a monarch, but Federalist 69 refuted this idea by stating the people would elect the president, eradicating the problem. Stemming from Plato's advocacy for public morality in The Statesman, Buddhists too pushed for a Bill of Rights that would protect Americans' individual liberties. The same anti-tyrannical sentiment exists today in the forms of checks we place upon our government. The Electoral College places a sufficient check on the popular vote and the filibuster on the Congress floor.
Over the past 200 years, America has made progressive strides towards becoming a democratic republic by continually evolving more minority voices in legislature. In the 2018 midterm elections, the first openly homosexual candidates, the first Muslim women, the first Latinas in Texas, the first African-American woman in Massachusetts, and the youngest woman ever to enter Congress were all elected to represent their states in the House of Representatives.
Today, more citizens are voting and are more involved than ever before. In our home state, 2.4 million Arizonans voted in the 2018 midterm elections, the highest turnout since 1982. The social hierarchy our country was founded upon, where only the educated and the wealthy voted, is broken. Into the 20th century, these social prerogatives were redefined in mass immigration fostered by the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 and the introduction of the Civil Rights Movement.
As Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. said, freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed.
And citizens' attitudes towards the government and the way these beliefs and mold democratic ideals or civic dispositions are essential for the prosperity of a republic. Citizens must understand the sheer value of their rights before understanding how to act upon them. Voting, being a part of community organizations, and educating constituency about local issues are all civic dispositions a functioning citizenry should abide by. Education forms citizens' moral standards and the way in which they view their government, as emphasized by Aristotle.
The First Amendment, our most fundamental right, has created a foundation for citizens to foster change. The 17th Amendment was added with the rise of the People's Party in the 1890s, making the Senate more accountable to the people. The 26th Amendment was ratified after the Vietnam War, when young soldiers protested, too young to vote, but not to die. These amendments of the Constitution create a more transparent government with more responsibility to its people, the exact ideal highlighted in Federalist 51.
The government does have a responsibility to bolster and encourage these rights. In order to further civic dispositions for further generations, the U.S. should turn to improving civic education. Problematically, only 9 states currently require a year of civic education to graduate high school, and 10 states absolutely have no requirement.
Consequently, only 33% of Americans were able to pass the American citizenship test, according to a recent poll by CBS. Deficits in civic education breed a culture of an uninformed and uninvolved populace. We need to allocate responsibility to our government to help cultivate a healthy democratic republic.
President FDR once said, "The ultimate rulers of our democracy are not a president and senators and congressmen and government officials, but they are the voters of this country."
Great. So my colleagues and I will have some follow-up questions, and I'll begin. John Adams, who drafted the 1780 Massachusetts Constitution, was a staunch proponent of bicameralism to check the democratic impulses of popular government. Why does the Senate matter so much in a Republican government?
So in our current state of nation, we have a bicameral legislature wherein we have the upper house, the Senate, which represents the needs and wants of the states, whereas the House of Representatives represents individual districts and their constituents in lesser proportions within the states. In order to represent the states' needs and wants in our federalist system, we have the Senate, wherein we are proportioned 2 senators per state. This is important as every state is equal in this matter. However, population determines allocation in the House of Representatives, and thus each state with varying population and different needs and concerns in their citizens' needs and wants is seen in the House.
In terms of popular government, the House of Representatives allows us to have more of a local identity, while the Senate gives us that state identity highlighted in the Constitution, that are state rights. And so the Senate allows us to be more of an individual body, but also a body whole of our state.
The 3 of you opened by talking about sort of the march toward democracy or more democratic representation, and you read court cases, or listed court cases. And courts are sort of profoundly undemocratic because judges have lifetime appointments, and I wonder if you could spell out a little bit, unpack that tension in there for me, and maybe talk about if you think that we should abolish lifetime appointments of judges in the judiciary.
I certainly don't think we should abolish these life tenures, mostly because it keeps the judges unbiased in terms of their ruling. And instead, it places this check where they can see the Constitution for what it is, not what their biases are, and affirming these 14th Amendment rights to Latino Americans or other rights to Japanese Americans that were in prison further expands these rights to not only look at what their personal beliefs may be in terms of if a judge may lean to the inclination where a certain minority shouldn't deserve these rights. It doesn't matter what their opinion is, it matters what the Constitution reads as.
The life appointments of the Supreme Justice eradicate the problem of re-election. And a lot of the time we see in the Senate that we will have senators who vote more on the side of their party than necessarily with their interests, due to the fact that they, like the House of Representatives, they are re-elected every 2 years. A lot of the work is to get in the House of Representatives or get in the Senate and then stay there. So with the Supreme Court, we don't have that problem, and we don't see the problem where we don't have that pressure of bias upon the Supreme Court.
I personally disagree with my colleagues, and instead I see, when we look at the example of Baker v. Carr, where Justices Frankfurter and Whitaker explicitly deliberated upon the needs and wants of their citizenry as contrasted with their own personal beliefs, we see that justices reach a certain point in their life where they must go back from the private sphere into the public sphere. In other words, justices have a certain time in their life where they are able to be representatives of the people, but at some point it becomes taxing upon them as people to act as judiciators of the people.
If you could use the term republic or democracy to describe the United States, which term would you use and why?
So, as per Federalist 39, James Madison states that our nation is a republic. We have citizens who elect representatives, and we put our full faith and power into these representatives to represent our interests. And in that manner, we can also impeach these representatives if we see them to be not fit, as seen what happened to Bill Clinton in his administration. And this is furthered by Article 2, Section 4.
I would actually say, I would agree with Harsha. I would say that I think that we are a republic in the sense that the core foundation of a democracy is one man, one vote. And so here with our presidential elections and specifically, we use the Electoral College, which checks the popular vote, and our electors are supposed to then vote with the popular vote. So a misconception would definitely be that it is not necessarily one man, one vote in the United States, and for that reason I would say we are a republic.
Yeah, I would agree with both of my colleagues actually on certain levels. On a federal level, I think we are more of a republic for sure because there are more impediments to this majority rule that might happen at a local or a state level in terms of these microcosms of having a popular vote decide the outcome of an election. So on those terms, I would say we're more of a democracy at local and state levels and more of a republic at federal levels.
So, what are some of the ways that the founders created constitutional mechanisms to control popular passions in the area of foreign policy?
So directly in foreign policy, we have it required that Congress views all terms of foreign trade and therefore regulates them. This is important as seen with the case of the XYZ affair during John Quincy Adams' administration. We had the case of possible foreign trade and sentiments with France destroying our relationship with Britain, which was after the revolution, an ally of ours.
Are there, what's the sort of constitutional body, well, what's the legislative body that seems to have more influence over treaties and foreign policy?
Most definitely the Senate, in my view.
I would agree.
This is due to the fact that it represents states' rights and their views over the people's.
Great. So as I said, I want to thank you and your teacher and any parents here for all your hard work. This is difficult material. I thought you did a very good job with it. I like your references to Federalist Papers, but I think you also referenced the Anti-Federalist Papers, I think, too, which is great. I think that's the first time we've heard that today. And your kind of recitation of the different amendments and the different both primarily the rights of it, but the expansions of suffrage under those. I thought that was great, and I like the the kind of various quotes you used, but I thought the way you kind of wrapped it up in your introductory remarks on civic education and the discussions about and the data around the citizenship exam and how poorly educated we often, portions of the population seem to be about sort of the basic elements of citizenship. And I thought you did a good kind of workmanlike answer to my question about why the Senate matters. I think you kind of got there in some of the follow-up discussions too. But I thought you're very strong on federalism and related to this question, the way in which you brought that into the discussion about whether we're a republic or not. I thought your response about how that occurs both on the national level but also on the state level is very good. And I really like the reference to the XYZ affair. It's a little bit of an oddball question about foreign policy and popular passions, and I thought that was an excellent historical example. So well done.
I was happy that when you talked about the founding fathers, that you talked about the tyranny and the fear of a monarchy, which is, the foundation, obviously, of our country. You talked about the Bill of Rights, so I was happy that you had an understanding of the importance and the significance of that even today. You talked about the impact of the 2018 election and what's happening, on a practical, as a practical matter throughout the country. You gave suggestions for improving participation in government, and I was pleased to see that you're thinking about, civic engagement. Very, very important, and you're here, and that's proof positive that you find it important, and your families do too. So I give you a lot of credit for that. Thank you. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
I would echo all of those compliments and just make a high-level observation, which is this unit in particular, I think, is very complex and nuanced, and it's really easy to argue both sides of all of these questions and issues, which makes it so interesting. And I think in all your responses, you showed deference to the complexity and the nuance of it, and looking to find a path forward through these issues. So that was very effective. Good job.